Allina Health is proud to support your Loons as the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United. Every day, we provide expert care to keep the team in top form on match day. All across Minnesota and western Wisconsin, you can find the same dedicated providers just a short drive away. It's expert care when and how you need it. Schedule your visit at allinahealth.org today. Allina Health, all together better. Welcome back to the Sound of the Loons podcast, brought to you by Allina Health. And I am here with my new assistant coach. Welcome to the podcast, Josh Wolff, officially.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. It's been a good first 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into, your overall impressions of the team, overall impressions of how it's going compared to potentially groups you've worked with in the past. But let's rewind and start at the beginning for you. Give the fans a little bit of an insight into where you grew up, where you're from, and it's ultimately how you began your soccer path.
Yeah, there's a lot there, but I was born in Florida, West Palm Beach, youngest of three brothers, and was kind of the runt of the litter. Took a beating in everything from soccer to football to baseball, but we moved to Georgia when I was about 10, and soccer was more year round, so that's kind of where it started for me. But I look up to my brothers a good bit, and I had more of a love for soccer than other sports, so we just kept kind of charging that space, and you end up going through high school and college and so forth, and I don't think you really thought there was a professional pathway there, but you try to get a scholarship and see what happens, and that's kind of where it went, and it certainly took me in some good directions that I was able to maximize.
Did you did all your brothers play?
Yeah, they did. They were 5 and 7 years older than me, so we moved to Georgia. One brother stayed in Florida. One came to Georgia, but he ended up coming back up there. And again, we played a lot of pickup soccer. We'd be at indoor arenas, but I would play with all the older kids. And you know how it is. You're young, you're little, you're just taking a beating, but you enjoy it. Your brothers look after you, and you're fairly fearless at that point because you got your big brothers kind of taking care of you and looking at you. But no, it was good. It was a good certainly upbringing.
It's funny. I had a similar upbringing with my brother. He was in '87. So he was 4 years older than me. So I would do double sessions because we had the same coach. So my brother would train first, and then I would just be like, all right, cool, I'm going to join. And then I would stay and do my own. But eventually, once you play with older players, you start to realize really quickly, like, hey, I got to kind of release the ball and get it off my feet and stuff. And that was able to kind of help me develop. And me and you aren't the biggest guys in the world, but obviously with the traits that we had, do you attribute that to just playing with like people older than you from a quick age?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. You have to, you had to adjust your qualities and traits based on the environment that you're in. So smaller, use speed and certainly not dwelling on things, and decision-making becomes more imperative, and just thoughtfulness in general about the game. How do you stay elusive, and how do you stay effective? But yeah, that was part of it. And then, obviously as I went through childhood, it was college and professional, and I tried to ride out a career as long as I could, and injuries and age get the better of you in time, and I was happy to stay in the game and continue to learn in the coaching side.
We're going to dive into that a little bit more. Then I was happy to go to college, play a little bit of pro games, and keep in the game a bit. South Carolina, went there, and then you were Project 40. So for those who, I guess, residencies even now, thing of the past as well, take us through that selection process, because this was the beginning days of it, where ultimately it was created with the idea, was it like ODP, where you guys were selected to now be the next generation, and ultimately you got to the point with the full national team. So take us into that process in the beginning, because it was different than mine, but again, it's fascinating to see how much the game has grown.
Yeah, I think Project 40 was part of some of the early versions of what Generation Adidas is today. But, being a college player, I think there was this idea of how do we capture younger players, and Sunil Gulati had a big impact on U.S. soccer and certainly development of MLS. He brought in this Project 40 project, basically, and it was about young underclassmen leaving school early to chase the dream of playing professional soccer. So that was in front of us, and, reluctantly, I'm sure my parents saw me decide to take that pathway after being at school for basically 3 semesters, 3 seasons.
Yep.
And did a little bit of residency in USOC out in San Diego and qualifying for World U20 World Cup. And at that point after that, I was able to join MLS through Project 40.
And you got drafted to Chicago, I believe it was?
There were some allocations in there. There were some players that got moved into a better situation, but Benny played for Bruce at Virginia, so there were certainly probably some pull there. But there was probably a dozen to 15 of us that were just dispersed into the league in some variation of a selection process. But where you landed was where you landed, and you tried to make the most of it.
And your first year was 99, which, if I'm not mistaken, Bob was the head coach, right?
98, yeah.
98, yeah. And then eventually Dave was the head coach. But what was it like? Because if I'm not mistaken, your team was pretty good.
Yeah, no, the first year we won Open Cup and MLS Cup.
There you go.
It was a rough start. I wasn't probably with the team until about June, just because I was the younger kid. I was a college kid kind of coming into the space. It was an expansion team that was still trying to find its way. Bob was the coach. We had a lot of good players that have stayed into the game to this day. And
name them. Go through.
You could go through Jesse Marsh, Chris Armas, Ante Razov, Zach Thornton. Tommy Sohn was in it for a good bit. Trying to think who else there was. Peter Novak was obviously a coach in our league, but there's
that's a good group.
There's a decent amount of people that certainly still are involved. Frank Lopez that are involved in the game today, but it was a good starting point. It was a good place to land. I think they cared about you and certainly worked on the development side, but I literally didn't see a ton of the field, any of the field until about June. So it took a little while to, again, establish my feet at who I was and get that opportunity. What's
the whirlwind process like going from college? And I went through it myself, but I'm curious to hear your story about getting drafted, Project 40, coming in, not really playing much in the summer, but ultimately having a lot of success for a team and really take us into your role. I mean, were you starting? Because Peter Novak and Ante were the forwards, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the team was extremely, for what I thought, at least at the time, it was a deep team. So for me, I was young. I would train Monday through Thursday, and I would play in the A-League Thursday through Sunday, which doesn't really exist these days. It's the USL, but I had to go kind of cut my teeth and prove my worth in that space. So going, on the road basically every game. There were no home games, so we went as a group of Project 40 players, and we went all over the country playing in this league, and it was challenging, but it was an opportunity. So for me, you have to find a way to get the opportunity, and then you have to make the most of it.
Of course.
And as I did that, I got more opportunities with Chicago, and then I played probably the last 14 games and had a good impact in that.
There you go. And then going from Chicago led you abroad. Take us through some of the steps and take us through just your history in that sense through a little bit of your MLS career. Let's work our way through that.
Yeah, I think I was in Chicago for 5 years. It was probably the longest I was anywhere. I had a couple bad injuries. I had an ACL and a Liz Frank injury, a foot injury that was kind of funky. And then I actually had a second ACL when I came back from the 2002 World Cup. So it was a little bit choppy to say. There was certainly the optimism and the potential, and then there were some things that happened along the way that challenged that. But the adversity piece is part of it. It's kind of what guides you and drives you and pushes you. Went to Kansas City for a bit and finished there. We went to an MLS Cup and lost. And at that point, I made the second 2006 World Cup. And at that point, I was looking for something different, to have a different experience and try to go abroad. And I couldn't get a work permit, so I missed out on going to England. But I still wanted to go, so I ended up in Germany for a couple of years, and it was eye opening. It was really good.
So before we touch on the Germany, you kind of glossed over it, but you made 2 World Cups. Let's not. I appreciate your humility and kind of going through your story, but the World Cups don't grow on trees as much as obviously in the public we have one coming to the States. Yeah. What's that process like? Getting selected, feeling the pride, going there, the training camp. Take us in. Obviously, the 2002 World Cup was one of the most historic, and barring a handball that wasn't called, which VAR would have taken back now, that team would have been, I think, in a semifinal. So take us just through both of those and just the things you learned, the experiences, what you take, and what maybe you keep with you to this day.
Yeah, I think that any and all of those experiences with the national team are quite memorable. You have to obviously do the work inside your league and the club level to get those chances. I was able to go to an Olympics in 2000. That kind of probably vaulted me a little bit more on the international scene. We had a very good Olympics in Sydney. After that, I was in with the national team and was fairly regular over the next 6 or 7 years. And yeah, I think when you go to a World Cup, it's, there's a lot going on. There's the dynamic of the group. I still look at the 2002 team as being one that was just full of really good balance of personality, character, leadership, youth, experience. And that's needed because it's a big event. It's challenging. You're going to hit some bumps. You're going to have some success, but how you manage all those things in its own little vacuum is important. But it was exciting. And 2006 was a little bit more lackluster, but it was still a good experience to have the World Cup and be in Germany. The results were fairly similar. We just weren't able to grab the result in the third game to kind of push us through.
Yeah, the 2002 World Cup was my first, like the coming out party for a World Cup. You always ask someone which was the first one. In 98, I was only 7 years old. But in 2002, in South Korea and Japan, and watching those games, watching the game against Portugal, watching the game against Mexico, that was my introduction to, I would say, global football, and especially the U.S. men's national team. And that really sticks with me. And it's funny to talk to the younger generation about which is their World Cup. Some of them, it's like the last World Cup, some of the younger players. That's right. But for me, that was the one, the jerseys, the balls, beating Figo in that first game and stuff. Like that was something that really stuck with me. But we'll stick with the national team topic now. You've played a good chunk of games. You've scored a few different goals for them. Are there any goals in which stick out to you in your national team career, of ones that that was pretty cool, or that was a good finish?
Yeah, I think that the Dos a 0 ones, any of the ones against Mexico, always seem to resonate with people, and it certainly has an emotional spot for me as well. I mean, they're big moments. It's always good to beat Mexico, whether home or away. I was never able to experience it away, but those are fun games. There's good events. The Gold Cups were good. The World Cup and the Olympics, those types of experiences, though, that's why you play the game. You want lasting memories. You want to be part of something that was bigger than just the moment. Yeah. And those are the memories that are very fond. I wish I had more documentation of it, but my kids to this day probably still don't really believe I played soccer at a high level, given where we're at right now. But it was those were good times. Those were really good times.
Sydney was 2000, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the? And I'm gonna have a big FOMO here because my group failed to qualify back in 2012 for the Olympics. What was the opening ceremony like? What's that process? Because there's the phones might be these giant, like, I don't even know if you could record it. Everyone has video cameras and stuff. But
none of that existed back then. We didn't have the video phones. We didn't go to the opening ceremonies. You're there. We were in Sydney, so we started in Canberra, and that was where our opening games were. But we would move venue as each game came. But because the event is so long, because it's a soccer tournament, it takes days. So we were there. We started probably a week before the ceremonies actually even took place, and some players stayed to go to the closing ceremonies, but no one was going to the opening ceremonies. We had Clive Charles as our coach. Yeah, no, it is business, and that's the one great thing about it was Clive Charles was, he had such a lasting impression on a lot of us because while we were there, he was, all about the moment and the experience, but make sure you enjoy your family, your life, and he didn't tell anybody what he was going through at the moment. We have a boatloads of respect for who he is and what he meant and what he stood for, but he ensured that everybody, maximized that opportunity, that moment, but also got to enjoy that side of it being an experience.
If you're looking to hone your skills on the pitch, Minnesota United has your back. Our youth clinics and development camps range from goalkeeper training to academy tryout preparation to good old-fashioned summer soccer camps. We've got something for athletes of all ages and skill levels. Check out our camp offerings at MNUFC.com. Yeah, I never had the pleasure of meeting Clive, but my first roommate, once I signed professional, was Heath Pierce, who played at University of Portland. Spoke, incredibly well of him. And then when I played for the Timbers, I came from Norway, and I was wearing number 3. And I said, "Can I wear number 3?" They said, "It's retired." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Oh, it was the number Clive Charles wore. No one wears it." And I'm thinking, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? And then starting to hear the stories, seeing the impact, hearing everyone speak about him, I was like, okay, checks out. So the fact that you had the experience of playing under him, I can only imagine, that sticks with you for a long time.
No, for sure. He was in between the lines. It was business, and he wouldn't allow things to ever deviate from that. And we had young players and we had experienced players. You get 3 older, overage players as can take part in the Olympics. And, there'd be, some jostling in training and some sidebars, but if you disrespected an older player, he's, that's not happening on his watch. If you said something in sarcasm, it's not happening on his watch.
Really?
But, he was very protective of the respect that's earned and needed when you're on the field. Off the field, go have a laugh, go have a beer, go do what you want to do, enjoy it, and enjoy one another and bust each other balls, so to speak. But on the field, there's a respect piece, and we're going to maintain that. And it was, you had a lot of respect for him. He was a jovial person. He had a good way about him.
That's awesome to hear. Who were the overage players?
Jeff Agus, Brad Friedel, and Frankie Haydock.
Because you get three. Yeah, it's right. You get three. I wish I could hear stories like that all day. Again, in Portland, he's ever present.
Yeah, for sure.
Ever present.
Rightfully so.
Everywhere, around the club, in the university, and everything along those lines. So now fast forward, into Germany, taking your career there. What was it like going abroad?
It's good. I think it's eye-opening. We live in a league where we have a lot of players come from other countries. So for me, it was good to go there and experience that. You're the person that can't speak the language, can't understand everything, has to struggle a little bit, needs to go and learn the language. I have kids in school, and you have to go to hospitals, and you have to go to supermarkets. So you have to prioritize, your space, sort of say. But as long as you tried to take in the language and tried to speak, I think you get a little bit of help. But from that standpoint, I really enjoyed it. I wanted to do something different. I wasn't afraid of it being uncomfortable. It's just, for me, it was having gone to an Olympics and 2 World Cups. I wanted to play abroad. I wanted to go and experience that and see what it was like. And I left Kansas City and went to Germany and Munich and spent 2 years there. Greg Berhalter was there as well. And I'd say that's where kind of my interest in the game and certainly coaching started to be shaped. But it was good. It was a different way of being involved in the game and the game being delivered to me. And I think that's what I appreciated most.
I haven't seen you speak German yet with Morris or Julian.
I have a little bit with those guys, but I don't do it in front of you. It's less, it's a little worse than my Spanish.
Your Spanish is not bad at all. You don't give yourself enough credit, but I appreciate the very, very good segue, obviously with meeting Greg and kind of, you said, piquing your interest and thinking about coaching.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a bit. He gave you one of your first opportunities to work with him in Columbus.
Yeah, I was with my career ended in DC, and I was an assistant or a player coach with Ben Olsen, who again I grew up with. We went to Olympics, we went to World Cups together, and I to this day love him. And I didn't have anything to help with. I wasn't a coach, but I was a coach that didn't really have a way yet, or have the ideas, or have clarity as to how to really bring things to life. And Greg came back from Germany, or he'd coached in Sweden, and he came to MLS. And when he came to Columbus, he offered it up. And, I was, obviously sad to leave Benny, but I knew I needed to learn. I needed to be in an environment where you're going to be immersed in it, and you're going to be, inundated with a real way of how you want to play, some ideas, how to teach and build things. So I jumped at the opportunity. I was with Greg for 5 years in Columbus and a year with the national team. And
did you see I know it's tough because as you get older, you get more experience. But did you process the game the same way you did as a player that you do as a coach? Because again, it's very analytical, and you see a game a very specific way. Were you starting to develop that as you got older to kind of see things?
I think subconsciously, yes, because I don't know, when you talk about the game, you start to look at it and see it in certain ways. You mentioned or talked about earlier, when you're bigger, maybe you underdevelop certain attributes. When you're smaller, you underdevelop or overdevelop other attributes. And for me to survive, I just looked at the game as how can I be successful utilizing the players around me, but ultimately my own qualities. And as a coach, I try to look at it the same way. How can we put these guys in position? How can I utilize their qualities, their skill sets, but also keep in mind there's ways that we can go about helping them and give clarity, but build relationships on the field that can add efficiency to what we're trying to do. Of
course, and I think you're starting to see that now, and we'll get into our team now as we're slowly catching up to now. But obviously, after Columbus, you end up in Austin, and just take us through a little bit of your experience there. First time being a head coach, and what you learned, and just how you grew, and eventually we'll get to now. But take us into the times at Austin.
Awesome experience to build a team from nothing. Really challenging. I was one of the first hires there. When you try to build out your high performance staff, you build out your soccer ops staff. Claudia was actually even hired. Our sport director was hired even a little bit after I was hired. But you have a real opportunity with a blank canvas to start building. You build out your departments, and you try to identify players to go and get, and then you try to bring all this together and get on a field and try to put it together and make sense and be successful. And this is during COVID, which made it even more challenging. So it was riddled with some adversity, but the experience was awesome. And the first year was a struggle, but you could see the progress inside the process. So as we added some pieces after our first year, we were rip roaring and ready to go in year 2, and certainly achieved a lot of great things on the field as well as off the field. But it was a great experience, great opportunity, and a huge responsibility that I was super appreciative of.
Yeah, Western Conference Fun. I remember you waxed our team a few times, and that team was very good. The 2022, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it's a good group. Good group. It's hard. It's hard to sustain success. It requires thoughtfulness from the entire organization. How you maintain players, how you move on players, how you keep building the leadership. And when it's good, it's good. If it's not right, the things can go sideways quick, and it's part of what happens in sports. Sadly, in this league, you see it often.
The league is built literally to challenge success, right? You have the parity model. The league is built to be like, hey, you're good one year. Let's see if we can knock you off your pedestal because, allocation money and all these different, factors, even the draft picks and stuff. We're going to try to make the teams on the bottom better and, keep them where they're at. But fast forward now 2 years, you come to us after spending, some time in Houston. When you initially got the phone call, what were your initial thoughts about joining the Loons here in Minnesota?
Yeah, I had a couple conversations with Khaled, throughout the year. I was in Houston. I was with Benny. I was, not interested in sitting at home for a year and getting paid to do nothing. So Benny offered me a great opportunity to be on the field around a group. And I think, this opportunity came late, January 13th, 12th. I mean, it was a late arriver and a fast mover. And, obviously they had a huge success last year, Minnesota United, and the coach decided to leave in the offseason. So it makes the transition pretty hectic and a little bit unknown, but I looked at what the group was and certainly the leadership inside that with a person like Khaled and Cam coming in as a coach. And again, what I can do from an offensive side to help Cam and this organization and these players, I think is what was most interesting and appealing to me. Mm-hmm. It's a team that has quality to do a little bit more with the ball. And that's, what we want to evolve into and maintain being a very good defensive team while I think everyone knows how good they are on set pieces or how good we've been on set pieces last year. And we're going to need to maintain that. But I thought it was a good opportunity to be around, again, good people. That's a good organization and help them become a little bit better at what they do.
Yeah, and I think if for any of the fans, I hope they put some clips. I hope social media does this, but I think you start to see some of these ideas come to life with the first performance against Kansas City, and then we just had one today. But just take us through your initial thoughts coming in. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. Again, you move into families here, and now you're in Irvine. We're in Coachella. But just take us through your initial first thoughts with the group and what you're looking forward to going into the season here starting up soon.
Well, I think the progress that we see and that you're able to see in the games is what's exciting. Again, I mentioned there's qualities and personality and certainly the group that stand out, but there's a want and a willingness to play. And the competition, the competing aspect is awesome. I mean, you've seen that all of last year, and you've seen it right away in these first 2 games as well. So for me, it's getting a little bit more inundated with the players and familiar with them and their qualities, and for bringing in some attacking ideas or some options, principles, whatever you want to call it, but doing it in smaller doses, not as I would if, as I did as a coach and taking things over. I know there's a good group here, and I'd be trying to be pretty selective and patient with what I add to the group, but I think they're pretty receptive to it. The first thing is there's an openness and a willingness, and that's what you like to see in players. Yeah,
and I think for me, being here last year, the guys are excited to learn.
Yeah.
It's a unique group because everyone is extremely excited to learn and is trying to digest, a lot of the information as quickly as possible. Sure. Because again, there's part of it and we're still going through preseason, but I think you've done a fantastic job. And from a technical side, you've fit in seamlessly. You've added to the group. You've been an awesome addition.
All my quirky words.
There you
go.
Oh, it's perfect. No, it's great because we're getting all the isms. We're getting it because to me, as you say, we all got to be on the same page going forward. And I think that's what's always going to be most important. Is I always say the we is greater than me, especially at this club. And now you are a part of the we. So thank you so much for coming on this week's episode of the Sound of Loons podcast, brought to you by Line of Health. Maybe we'll have you back later in the year. We'll see. But if not, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm sharing your story with the fans. I know I enjoyed listening.
Super. Likewise. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yep.